So, how did we get here? How does a single tragic event in Minneapolis spiral into a full-blown nationwide crisis? What starts out on the streets is now sending these massive shockwaves right into the halls of power, and believe it or not, it's rattling the entire global economy. Let's break down exactly how this is all connected.
And that's not just some catchy headline or an exaggeration. It's the reality. A single flashpoint has ignited this firestorm of protest and debate all across the country. And to really understand the blaze, we have to go back and look at the spark.
So, first up, the spark. What exactly happened in Minneapolis that set all of this in motion? Okay, so here are the core facts. In Minneapolis, a 37-year-old named Renee Nicole Good was killed by an agent from ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, this distinction right here is absolutely crucial. This wasn't a local police matter. This was a fatal encounter between a federal agency and a civilian, and that one fact changes everything that came next. As you can imagine, this incident did not stay contained in Minnesota for long. That spark we just talked about, well, it quickly ignited flames that just spread like wildfire across the whole country. What started in Minneapolis went viral, but in the real world. Almost overnight, it felt like thousands of people were pouring into the streets, and not just in one city, but in cities all across multiple states, all of them demanding justice and some real accountability. And if you look at the slogans, at what people were chanting, you see something really specific. These aren't just vague calls for reform, they are laser-focused on the federal agency involved. Chants of "Abolish ICE" tell you this has moved way beyond a single incident. This is now a direct challenge to the very existence of a government institution. So as the streets filled with protesters, the shockwaves slammed into Washington, D.C., and that's when they triggered a political earthquake, a real crisis at the highest levels of government. Now, you might think the goal would be to de-escalate, to calm things down, right? Well, that's not what happened. Instead, the administration's response was to threaten a massive show of force. The whole conversation shifted to invoking a powerful and super controversial federal law to suppress the protests. So what is this thing, the Insurrection Act? I mean, it sounds intense, right? And it is. It basically gives the president the authority to deploy the U.S. military on American soil against its own citizens. It completely bypasses the normal barriers that keep the military out of domestic law enforcement. It's a huge step and one that is almost never taken lightly. And this threat, man, it just split the response right down the middle. It opened this deep political chasm. On one side, you had the administration framing it all as a law and order problem that needed military force. But on the other side, you had opponents who saw the initial incident as a major rights violation. And the threat of using the military? Well, they saw that as a terrifying overreach of federal power. All right, let's pivot a bit, because this kind of political instability, this kind of social unrest, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It has very, very real consequences for the economy, and we're already starting to feel those tremors. It's kind of like a domino effect, this chain of fear in the market. Let me walk you through it. First, the street unrest gets worse. That creates political risk. That risk, in turn, completely spooks investors, who then start pulling their money out of anything that looks uncertain. And where does that money go? It goes looking for a safe haven. Assets that are expected to hold their value when everything else is chaotic. It's a classic flight to safety, and it's all driven by fear. And you can see that fear playing out right here when you look at which parts of the stock market are feeling the heat. Banking takes a hit because of just general uncertainty. Retail suffers when people are scared and stop spending. And of course, companies that rely on immigrant labor are directly in the line of fire. The instability is hitting the economy right where it hurts. Now, this is where things get kind of weird, a little counterintuitive, with the US dollar. In the short term, all this global chaos actually makes the dollar stronger. Why? Because investors are rushing to that safe haven we just talked about. But if this crisis drags on, that could flip. Prolonged instability right here at home could destroy the very confidence that makes the dollar seem safe in the first place. And the ripples just keep spreading outwards, way beyond the US borders. I mean, think about it. When the world's biggest economies start showing signs of serious trouble at home, it raises the risk level for everybody. That can lead to crazy swings in prices for things like oil. And when oil prices jump, that often means more inflation for countries all around the globe. Okay, this all leads us to our final and maybe the most profound impact of all. This crisis has moved beyond just a single event or a few protests. It is now forcing a fundamental debate about the very nature of centralized authority. Remember that slogan we saw earlier, "Abolish ICE"?
Well, it's not just a protest chant anymore. It has broken into the mainstream. It's now part of a serious policy debate. People are questioning not just what an agency did, but whether that agency should even exist at all.
And that really gets to the heart of what's happening. The whole crisis is forcing a massive conversation about the basic relationship between citizens and the state. It's raising these huge questions about power, about control, and about our trust in these big, centralized institutions.
And whenever people start losing faith in those big institutions, well, that's when you start hearing more and more talk about decentralized alternatives. And that brings us to cryptocurrency. You can see two key scenarios playing out. In scenario one, if this crisis of faith just keeps getting worse, an asset like Bitcoin, which operates totally outside of government control, suddenly starts to look really attractive as an alternative system. But in scenario two, if the state responds with a really harsh crackdown with more censorship and control, that could drive demand for crypto that's specifically designed to be private and resist that control.
So the assets people are suddenly looking at are the ones that offer some kind of escape hatch. You've got Bitcoin, the original store of value outside the system. You've got privacy coins, which are built to protect users from being watched. And then you have all these other decentralized projects that are trying to build totally new systems from the ground up, free from any central point of failure.
Which leaves us with this final, massive question. We're seeing protests on the streets, huge threats from political leaders, a nervous economy, and this really deep philosophical debate about power itself. So, is this just another chapter in a long history of civil unrest, or are we actually witnessing a genuine breaking point for the country? I guess that's what the days and weeks ahead are going to show us.